Thank you. Thank you. So great to be here. Thank you for having me. I got to make a comment about the winter morning comment that Rhonda. I think that there's actually a bunch of you here that after a full week of sunshine and weather in the high 70s were secretly really relieved, right? When
No.
show your hands, right? That's what I notice about Seattleites, the real Seattleites, the people who have been here for a while, like, we were so done with that hot weather, okay? All right. We're here to talk about innovation, about how to build innovative skills in our leaders and teams. But before we talk about how to do it, I think it makes sense to talk about why it's important. I would tell you that we're living and working in an innovation economy. So this is not just 7 strengths for innovative leaders and teams, but it's 7 strengths for an innovation economy. Okay. So let's start by talking about that term, innovation economy. I didn't make that up, by the way. I heard it, the economists have said it, I've heard politicians say it, I've heard business leaders say it. What does it mean to you that we're working in an innovation economy? Anyone?
Changing economy?
Changing? Okay. What else? What else comes to mind when you hear that innovation economy?
Get more done with less.
Get more done with less. Okay.
Upgrades.
You need to adapt to change.
Upgrades.
Lots of upgrades. Say more about that, Chance.
I think of Apple, right? The iPhone 5 just came out, and I heard they're already introducing the new operating system, and their next version is already.
Yeah.
Right, you can't keep up. It's too fast.
You can't keep up. It's too fast. As soon as you get one, really, if you look at your cell phone, almost nobody has the current model, right? Even though it's not, we're all carrying one that's less than a year old. So it's this constant pace of change. How many of you feel that where you're working right now? You feel that pace of change? Okay. By the way, this is an interactive interactive discussion. So I'm going to ask questions and you're going to respond. Okay. It'll be more interesting, believe me. Okay. Rapid visible evolution. That's the way I see it. We can actually see the changes happening in our organizations. You don't have to stand too far back to think about how your organization has changed today from how it was just 2 years ago. Wouldn't you agree? Okay. And how many of us can actually look forward down the road 5 years with some accuracy? Pretty cloudy, isn't it? Okay. The new economic environment is substantially more volatile, much more uncertain, increasingly complex, and structurally different. Can you agree with that? Okay. That comes from this study. Every 2 years, IBM surveys CEOs around the world, and in 2010, they surveyed over 1,500. And this is this was sort of in the introduction to the 2010 IBM CEO survey. They talked about a changing environment and how CEOs felt like they needed to change the way that they were leading and what skills were different for them and what were important to them given this rapidly changing environment. So it's a different kind of economy. And so that is why we're talking about innovative leaders and teams. Okay? So I think it's important. I didn't really tell anything you didn't know, but I want to make sure we all knew why we're talking about innovation and innovative leaders and teams. We believe that innovation is important, right? I mean, we see it happening all around us. Can we opt out? How many of you feel like, boy, things are going a little too fast. I really like just not to be a part of that sort of rapid pace of change, slow it down a little bit. Is that an option? It's not, is it? We may not be the ones that are driving the change, okay, but we have to be able to adapt rapidly. Okay. So that's why we want to promote innovative leaders and innovative teams, because we know that our organizations have to be responsive. Now, if we're going to talk about innovative leaders and teams, let's start to envision some first, because what we're going to do today is try to understand the nature of innovation, and so therefore what are the strengths and skills and characteristics that we want to build in our teams. So innovative. Name some innovative people, some innovative leaders, Some innovative companies.
Richard Branson.
Richard Branson, thank you. Who else?
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
Richard Keller.
Pardon?
From Southwest.
Southwest Airlines.
Herb Keller.
Herb Keller, right, CEO, there, or founder, right? Okay. Who else? What other companies do you think of as innovative?
Microsoft.
Sorry? I don't know that one.
They're a restaurant and they do cookbooks and they make crazy things out of cornflakes and craziness.
Wow. All right. Well, are they located around here?
No, I think they're in New York, of course.
Oh, okay. Of course they're in New York.
Zappos.
Zappos. Okay. What else? Other innovative companies. Tom's. They're the Tom's of Maine? Oh, Tom's Shoes. Right. Amazon. Okay. So, yeah, we certainly have a lot of high-profile companies, don't we, that are doing things in different ways. I tend to think of folks like that as really the, iconic innovators. Now, it struck me after I put that up there that, these folks are in all kinds of industries, aren't they? They were in all kinds of industries. And only really Steve Jobs was in the digital industry, the gadget industry. I think a lot of times innovation is considered to be gadget, right? That's kind of the iconic thing is, or maybe the Boeing 787, that's innovative. But really, you talk about restaurants, right? You talk about Zappos, you talk about Tom's. Those are companies that are doing innovative things too, and they are not necessarily full of computer science majors. Now, Google is, okay? And so what I see here, and the reason I bring this up, is when we start to think about iconic innovators, so often that clouds the issue. Because it's not about us, right? I actually don't work at Google, okay? I'm not a computer programmer. Can I be innovative? Okay, you're right. And I think that's the thing that I want to get down to, is get past that confusion that starts with the iconic innovators are all making gadgets or they're doing breakthrough things. But what about the rest of us? Okay? How do we become innovative too? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I want to tell you a story about some innovators and make sure that we're all clear on what that can be. What's these other kinds of innovations that can be happening? In fact, when I asked Renee from Vigilant just before the lunch started about what they were doing that was innovative. And she actually could reel off several things, including some of the leadership training that they're offering now that's different and better than it used to be before. Okay? So we can find opportunities all around us. But let me show you a couple examples. This first one comes from healthcare. It's one of my favorite examples of innovation these days. So back in 2001, Dr. Peter Pronovost sees that central line infections appear in about 10% of patients. Now, how many people here are actually in healthcare? One. Okay, so you might know what that means. A central line in the middle of the screen there, it says it's a 12-inch catheter pushed into the jugular vein. So how big is 12 inches? That big? And where's your jugular vein? Yeah, so now think about that infection right there. Does that give you any anxiety? Like, I don't want that, right? So now you know why this doctor's concerned about it. He's concerned because he's got infections in 10% of people that have central lines. So what he said is, let's get the doctors and nurses to review a 5-step checklist verbally every time they insert a central line. Okay? Now keep in mind that the 5 steps were well known. Every doctor, every nurse already knew them. There was he didn't make up the 5 steps. What he did to change things is he wrote them down and said, would you please, follow these verbally and just to confirm that you did it. Pretty amazing results. When he first did it himself, his own little experiments, he got almost down to 0 central line infections. But in a much larger study done in Michigan, they got really remarkable results. And we look at these results. In first 3 months, central line infection rates in Michigan's intensive care units decreased by 66%. First 18 months, they saved an additional $175 million. And this is, of course, the important part, more than 1,500 lives. Because they made a checklist, and they asked people to review it verbally. I like that story. Okay, that's powerful. Here's where I got the story, from this book called The Checklist Manifesto. If you're interested in what's going on and getting better in healthcare, follow this guy. He writes a lot. He writes in the New Yorker. He writes books, and he's terrific. So interesting story, and his point there is, in healthcare, we could be much more process-driven than we are now, and that's a simple example, isn't it? Okay. Here's another simple example, non-digital example of innovation. I got this out of The Economist magazine. I get to ride on the airplanes a lot, so I get to read a lot of magazines. And this one kind of caught my eye, because I really do think it could be dramatically valuable. So it turns out the story is about MBA programs, what they call residential MBAs, where you take, it's 2 years full-time. We've got them at the University of Washington. We've got them at Seattle University. We've got them all over the Puget Sound. Okay? But it turns out that enrollment is dropping. And the fact is that the cost of tuition for an MBA program is going up faster than the increase in wages you're going to get by attending. So that makes sense that enrollment's going to start to fall off, right? So what they're suggesting here is, well, maybe you ought to start getting specialized MBA programs, and they make the example. The Ullen Business School at the Washington University in St. Louis. So there's a terrific medical school there. They've got an MBA program. What if they had medical sector management MBA there? Wouldn't that be specialized? Wouldn't that be different? Wouldn't that be value added? Okay, and I think so. So what I like about both of these examples here is they're so clearly not about technology, not about what we're always hearing about innovation, but in fact they're talking about taking things that we already have around us and using them in new ways. Okay, it's fresh, it's original, and I think that's where we have to allow ourselves to go with innovation when we want to build innovative people. So a conclusion I want to draw for you then is that yes, invention is important when it comes to innovation. Invention is very important. Okay, all the talk we'd have about science, technology, engineering, and math, incredibly important. But it's not the only source of innovation that we're going to have, particularly in all of our companies, if we all want to have more innovative companies. Invention's just a minor part of the source of innovation. What we have and what we need is to be able to see innovative opportunities in our supply chain, in our HR policies, in marketing, in our high schools, right? I mean, that's what we want to open up, right? And that's the language that we need to have if we're going to promote leaders, innovative leaders and teams. So I want a definition of innovation that's broad enough to handle all that. And that's what this is, change that delivers business value. Now, that's a term that I didn't actually make up, but I really like. And I got that term from talking to CIOs. About 2.5 years ago, I was writing the 4th edition of that book that you won and will be selling later. Okay. I was writing that book, and I wanted to write something about IT projects, and so I talked to CIOs, and I said to them, hey, what makes IT projects successful? One question that I asked to many, many CIOs. And what amazed me and totally surprised me is they all came back with the same answer, which is it delivered business value. Project delivered business value. Well, that's hard to argue with, isn't it? Project delivered business value. And then, and what I realized is that, so often in project management, at least, we focus on a lot of details, what your processes are, and do you have the right status reports, and process improvement is important, right? Don't get me wrong. But what they were talking about is really what are the results. Okay? And so that phrase, change that delivers business value, to me, summarizes what any innovation needs to be. And so if we ask ourselves, what does it take to create change that delivers business value, we can see that there's a host of strengths that are associated with that. Now, 2 years after that first study, IBM comes up with another one. So they do these every 2 years. And this time, a key part of this was recognizing that in this changing environment, what kind of workforce do we need? Okay? And so they use this term, which I think is brilliant, the future-proof employee. The future-proof employee. And look at the characteristics of the future-proof employee. Collaborative, communicative, creative, flexible. Okay? That all kind of conjures up that innovative feel that we're looking for, doesn't it? Okay. Now, the one thing I don't like about that is if I'm in your shoes, if my job is to develop this workforce and my CEO says, yeah, we want to develop a workforce that's collaborative, communicative, creative, and flexible. Not like the people we have now, but that's what we need. Okay? Like, well, that's a little abstract, isn't it? You know? I mean, how am I really going to do that? And that's what we're here to talk about today, how to do that more specifically than just say you need to be creative and collaborative. We believe that. How are we going to do it? Okay? So let me show you an example that I saw, and that's really kind of, for me, crystallized how we're going to do that. And it came from some future employees. In fact, this is a story about people that really won't be out looking for jobs for another 6 years. Okay? Because 2 years ago, my daughter was in the 8th grade. And in her 8th grade class, one of her teachers, and I can't remember what the class was for. I think it was an English class. But the class assignment was, we need to raise money for a nonprofit. And so the class identified a nonprofit. They were going to actually send money to victims of landmines in Vietnam. So they'd been reading about this, so they said, like, let's raise some money. And so they broke into teams, and the assignment was, bring back money by such and such a date. Okay, that's it. That's their assignment. And they came up with a lot of different ideas. My daughter's team came up with the idea of doing a talent show, middle school talent show. And so, one night, you can imagine if you've got a middle schooler, any middle schooler parents out there, okay, how much fun are we having at school where we've got kids that are singing and dancing and playing the piano beautifully, really beautifully. It was very exciting, and of course all the parents are extremely proud, right? And so afterwards, everybody was on a big high, quite a buzz there. And the students, like my daughter and her team who had put this together, were on a huge buzz, right? Sky high. And here's the thing that surprised me but made instant sense when they said it, because they weren't really on stage, right? They were behind the scenes, and this is what they kept saying. Nobody knows how hard we worked. Nobody knows how difficult it was to put this together. Because isn't that the case, right? Everybody sees the people on the stage, but it took them weeks, right? They ran auditions, they advertised, all of this stuff. And I realized in listening to her that she had the perfect educational experience for the future-proof employee. Because what was her assignment? Her assignment was raise money by such and such a date. Here's the result I want. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Her teacher didn't say, you put on a talent show. You need to have 10 acts. It needs to be on this date. She didn't say that. She just said, raise money. And this is true for all the students in the class. Here's a problem to solve. Do what you need to do. And so through that experience, I realized that if she got that over and over for the next 6 years, those kind of experiences, what skills would she have that she'd be able to bring to any kind of a job? I think those are exactly the kind of skills that we're looking for. I would say those are the key skills that we want to develop. The skills to create, to start with an opportunity, an idea, an inspiration, a problem, and come up with something that will solve that problem. The ability to work with other people effectively to do that, and maybe not just your immediate team. Right? How many of us have to work with people outside our department? Or how about outside your business or your organization to get something done? That's collaborate. Okay? And finally, deliver. Because it was only when they delivered that it made a difference. So that's our focus. How do we develop the strengths to create, collaborate, and deliver? Now, that's innovation. Okay? Those are the strengths that are going to drive innovation. And so to understand it and break it down further, because I said I was going to give you 7 specific strengths to do this, what we're going to do, we'll take a look at the journey of innovation. We're going to start with that inspiration or that pain. You know, because where does it all start? It doesn't start with a document that somebody hands you and says, I figured everything out, here's exactly what, you know, that's not the beginning. It starts with, hey, I just was listening to this radio program and I was wondering if, or I just attended this luncheon, you know, and I got this idea at the SHRM luncheon, I was talking to somebody, and that's where it all starts, right? So how do we get from there all the way over to value, delivering value? Because that's what counts. And it's this journey from inspiration or pain all the way to value that we talk about as the innovation journey. It starts with solving the problem and then being able to implement the solution, okay, at a macro level. So as you look at the inside of this document that I've handed you, you'll see that we have broken down that process in a little bit more detail. Okay. Now, I'm not going to walk through every step in that process in gritty detail for you. But what we are going to do is talk about how, if you're going to take that journey, what are the strengths that allow you to do it? Okay. 7 specific strengths that you can build in your teams. And these are the 7 strengths. So we'll look at each one of them individually. And I've also provided for you a little self-assessment. Because what do we know about learning? That if, what's the saying that we have in the learning business? Tell me and I'll forget. You know, show me and I might remember, but involve me and I'll understand, right? So if you want to understand, really understand, use this as we walk through these 7 strengths. I've given you 2 columns for somebody else. Okay, 1 column for yourself, 2 columns for somebody else. Who are you thinking about that you said, how, you know, this is about innovative leaders and teams. So is there a leader that you'd like to be reflecting on at your organization as we go through? Is there a team you'd like to reflect on, or is there a colleague that you'd like to think about as you go through? Because remember, one of the goals here is to make it specific enough that it's actionable. So we don't want to just talk like the CIOs did about they're flexible. I think that's a great attribute, but I'm not sure how to build it. Okay? I want to show you 7 actionable characteristics of high-performance leaders and teams. Okay? So you follow along. Why don't you take a moment right now and write down those names. Who are the names of the people that you're going to think about as we walk through these strengths? And then tell the person sitting next to you what you decide to do. Maybe it'll give you an idea as you think it over. But just pause for a moment while you do that. Just the tops. Yeah, we're going to walk through each one of them. Right. All right. So do you have some names on there? Have you put some names down? You know, if for some of you who are brand new to your organizations, this might be an interesting activity. Just you'll think about what you hope they are, even if you don't know them that well. Okay. All right. So let's keep moving. As we go along, of course, the option is to circle the star, obviously the best. The X means, yeah, don't have it. Okay. Check is, we're there, you know, okay, not great, okay. And you know what? You can always say, doesn't apply. Not an important strength. For whatever reason, not apply. It doesn't apply. So, but I think if you keep a scorecard, this will feel more real when you're done. So let's do that. And let's start with the first strength. And the first strength is analysis focused on stakeholder value. Again, if we want to create change that delivers value, we've got to be focused on value and value in the eyes of the stakeholder. So this process, starting with understanding, just saying, well, we get a pain or we get an inspiration or somebody comes up to you and says, Brian, I'm tired of X. Would you take a look at that? See what you can do about that. And that's how it starts. And then where do you go from there? Okay? So the process of being able to think something through when you begin with that and actually come up with something tangible that's focused on stakeholder, that's a strength. Okay? And that strength is based in the kinds of things we do when we learn Six Sigma, or if you're a business analyst. Okay? In the IT world, we often call that business analysis. The quality world has a lot of tools and techniques for this discipline as well. Okay? So there's specific things we can learn to move people through that. And one of the most important things here, because some people think of this as classic problem solving, but what I find there's missing when we do the classic problem solving is that stakeholder focus, that intense stakeholder focus. And let me give you an example of what I mean by intense stakeholder focus and how important it can be. So another example from healthcare. And some of you may be familiar with what a innovative healthcare organization Virginia Mason is. They are doing things that put them at the top of the heap in the country. And the book that you can buy about that talks about their journey. Now, one of the stories they tell in this book is about a change that they wanted to make in their cancer center. When people have cancer, they don't just show up once. They come back time and time and time again. It's a thing that you do quite a bit. And they said, look, we want to have a special cancer care unit that is better for our patients. The executives at the hospital said, let's set aside this room and this space up in the top of one of our towers with beautiful view so that when people come in here, they've got this gorgeous view. And they got the architect together, they got the doctors together, they got administrators, they got nurses. They started to put their ideas together about how they were going to make this a really terrific experience for the cancer patients. And then they realized who wasn't at the meeting. The patients. Patients weren't at the meeting. And when they brought the patients into the meeting, the first thing the patients said is, way up there at that, because what the patient experience was is they had to travel all over the medical center every time they went in. You go on the 3rd floor for this test, and you go on the 6th floor over here. They don't like walking around from place to place carrying their car. They said, what's really important to us isn't the view, it's going to one place. That would be important to us. Totally transformed the way that they were looking at this. So being stakeholder focused is a critical skill. And I think all of us have probably been in here, in this part of the life cycle of an idea, when we realized that, you know what, we were kind of thinking about the wrong thing, right? Like I teach this process actually at the United States Postal Service, and I was working with a team of managers who'd been tasked with one of their executives that said, here's a problem, solve it, and completely think out of the box. Anything goes here, and they kind of sent them down the path. And as we're working on this, what we realized quickly was that the executive was working off of some flawed assumptions. Okay? Now, what happens when you've got a team of people that's been tasked by an executive to do something, to go down a particular path, and you start working that path and you realize these are flawed assumptions? Do you have a little anxiety? Like, because you just want to call your boss up and go, or actually your boss's boss's boss, and go, hey, yeah, you know what you told us? I think it's totally wrong, right? So it can create some anxiety, but the fact is that's what they did. They were really nice about it. And to that executive's credit, he said, thank you. What should we be doing? Okay? Because it's the easiest mistake in the world to jump to conclusions when we've got a problem about what we should do. So this discipline of being able to start with a problem and then make something of it, get the facts, start to work our way through that process from a stakeholder point of view, can be learned, can be taught. Okay? And that's a critical first step if I'm going to develop something of value. Now the second skill is very related to it. This strength, tenacious, courageous creativity. We know creativity is important if we're going to be innovative, right? But did you know you had to be tenacious and courageous about it? Why do you need to be courageous about creativity? Why do I attach that term to creativity?
People won't always understand where you're going or why you're doing it. They'll question your motives or your behaviors.
That's right. Okay? People will question what you're doing. And why else do you have to be? Somebody else here, help me out. Why do you have to be courageous if you're going to be creative?
Something might not work. You might have to start over.
Exactly. Being out of the box, doing creative, being something new, you're bound to fail, aren't you? You are literally bound to fail if you're going to try to be creative. Okay? Does that mean you cannot succeed? No, it just means that you have to have the courage to stick with it. That's why tenacity is important. Okay? Little story about, well, first let me give you one of my favorite quotes on that. Who said that? Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Who says that? Who said that? Good guess. Thomas Edison. And of course, what is he known? His iconic, of all the zillions of inventions, I mean, he had so many patents, but we know him for the light bulb, right? Instantly. And how many light bulbs did he? A bunch. He said, when he finally got it, he says, I look at it as I've discovered 1,800 ways not to do it. Okay, not to make a light bulb. Now that takes tenacity, and that takes courage as well. It takes courage because we can be wrong. Who wants to be wrong? I don't think anybody does. So that's why it takes courage to be creative. A little story, I ran into a guy named Andy on an airplane. And, we're sitting next to each other, and we start chatting about things. And, he was considerably younger than me. He looked like he was about 15 years younger than me, early 30s, and, flip-flops, little spiky hair, and pretty casual guy. I figured, software developer, I don't know. No, he's an accountant. Okay, he's an accountant, but he writes about innovation in accounting. And what he says, my job, because he's like, what were you doing? I was probably just doing a talk like this, and so we start talking. He goes, oh, I'm promoting innovation in accounting. And he's got a blog, his company tries to help other accounting firms sort of get out of the past and get with the future. And so he told me this story. He says, I write a blog. I'm probably writing at least one blog post a week, 300 words. I got an opportunity to write a magazine article for a journal. So I said, great. What do you want? And they said, about 2,500 words. He's like, I can do that. Right? I write all the time. So he sends it in. The editor sends it back. Thank you. That was a good start. And he said, what do you mean? Well, I liked this part, this paragraph here. Okay, but now you've got to start working. And he thought, well, wait a minute, what's wrong with this? Well, it's not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's not as good as it can be. What he said was, that started the cycle of working with this editor who constantly said, that's great, now let's work on this part. Okay, that was a good improvement, now let's work on this part. Over and over, they cycled through that until he said, I put the best article together I had ever done. Okay? But he didn't get it the first time out of the gate. Now, who is your editor? Who provides that feedback to you? Who demands that of you? Who keeps sending you back? Or who do you do that for? Okay. So that's a leadership skill that I want to develop, that awareness that the editor had. And again, where does it take courage? Where does it take tenacity? It takes time, doesn't it? If I'm going to be like Tom Edison and find 1,800 ways not to do it on my way to doing it right, how much time have I budgeted to be creative? Okay? So one of the things that we teach our leaders when we're talking about leading creativity, you have to budget time not to do it right, but time to do it wrong if you're going to be a creative leader, innovative leader. Okay? So these two things, analysis focused on stakeholder value and tenacious, courageous creativity, they are hand in hand. You cannot begin to be really effectively creative if you don't understand your stakeholder. Really, all the great, creative, useful, innovative products that have come out are focused on solving somebody's problem. Okay? All the classic inventions you've never heard of. You hear the Segway, right? You know what a Segway is? Two-wheeled device, goes about, 8 miles an hour, 5 to 8 miles an hour. We see them once in a while, the mall, airport. That came out, people, it's a marvelous technology, right? But it's the classic failed innovation, because who wants to go 8 miles an hour, right? Not that many people, it turns out, okay? So instead of all of us having one, almost nobody has one, okay? On the other hand, what's the other iconic innovation that really worked, that just put Apple back on the map? iPod, right? It was great, right? But here's the thing. What do you think is really great about the iPod? What just made it such a hit? What do you think? What did you love about it when you first saw one? Small, put a ton of music on it. Like totally better than my Walkman, right? Yeah, total upgrade from my Walkman. But here's the thing. Who else did that solve a problem for besides you, the consumer? Solved a problem for the record company, didn't it? Like iTunes? Right. iTunes was what made that thing awesome, because you now had a legitimate way to buy songs. Okay? Back about 1998, 2000, this was a big problem. There were MP3 players around. Apple did not just create a cool way to store your music and to listen to it, but they created this stakeholder-focused solution that solved the problem for the record companies. I think that's what really made this thing fantastic. Because if you still had to pirate songs and steal music in order to make that, it would have just been one more thing that, like, just a gadget. Okay. Those two things go hand in hand. Now, recently a director of HR, the customer, says to me, we need to build up our execution muscle. We've got plenty of ideas, but we fail at execution. So these next 3 strengths are all about execution, okay? All about execution. And actually this first one's more than just execution, it's everything. Team-driven decision making. Because from the beginning of the journey all the way through to the end, how are we getting done? Probably a team. Okay? These things are not happening with just one person leading the charge. And what is that team doing? They're sitting down at meetings, they're solving problems, they're making decisions together over and over and over again. And you're on those teams, aren't you? You participate in those teams. When you're on a cross-functional team, think about this. When you're on a cross-functional team, who are you happy to see on that team? Who are those other people that you've worked with before and you're like, great, Tracy's on the team. Or, you know, Wes is on the team. I'm so glad to see these people on the team, because what do those people bring? Probably they bring subject matter expertise, but that's sort of just the entry fee, right? What makes some really great team members on those cross-functional teams? What are they doing?
Creativity, ideas.
They got creativity, they got ideas. What other attributes make them great to have around the table?
Open-minded.
They're open-minded, they listen well. Yeah, I'm sorry, you said?
Engage.
They engage. You know what? Those are learnable skills. They really are. They're teachable, learnable skills, the things that make these people effective at dialoguing. So when we talk about team-driven decision-making, I'm not suggesting that we don't have, you know, bosses that make decisions. That still happens. But what I am talking about is that in an innovative team, everybody gets to participate. Everybody should have the ability to participate, even if they aren't actually going to be the decision maker. They have to be able to have input into that process, right? So it's not, I start to look at this, I think, who do I not want to have that skill set? Okay? If you're on a team that's trying to drive a change, you got to have that skill set. Now, here's another important execution skill: goal-driven planning. Goal-driven planning. So, your team comes up, maybe it's the 8th grade team, and they say to the teacher, we're going to have a talent show. You know, got to check in, right? Teacher says, got a checkpoint, you got to tell me what you're going to do, and you got to tell me how you're going to do it. Okay? And this is common, right? You got a great idea? Sure, tell me how you're going to do it. What are you going to do? What's your plan? Now, goal-driven planning, fundamental project management right here, okay? Goal-driven planning looks like I should be able to take a goal, I should be able to break it down, I should be able to break it down, I should be able to break it down so that every task on that's necessary to accomplish the goal is known and visible. Okay? And that's a strength. That's a skill in itself. And then you take that and take it one step further, and you say, let's take a look at all those key, fundamental tasks that are necessary to get this thing done, and we can line those up and figure out which one has to come first, second, third, put them on a calendar, and next thing you know, that's how we get things done, right? I mean, you've got to have that basic competency just to put this luncheon on every month. Am I right? The people that do that, okay? So if you want somebody to drive change, to do something that they haven't done before, because when we put the luncheon on every month, we're like, we've done this before, we know how to do it. If we want to do something new, we absolutely have to have that strength. And the more people that have that strength, the more people can participate in making sure we've got it. Okay? That's how we get things done, how we stay on track. Okay? Is that making sense? So what comes with this? If I can put together a good plan, that was strength 4. The natural strength 5 comes with execution. Really strong, I get it done. When we talk about I need to strengthen my execution muscle, if I have a plan, that's the start. But what comes after that is systematic drive to completion. And there are 2 really important words here, systematic and drive. Okay? Because you've been around people that get things done, right? You think about people that get things done. They've got a drive to completion. Okay? But what you also know is if that's all they bring, they cause a wreck along the way. There's a lot of collateral damage. They're extremely goal-oriented. They get things done, but who cares what the cost? I can't have that. Well, that's not what we want. So that's where the systematic piece comes in. So systematic goal-driven execution means that they are systematic about communicating. Again, it comes back to my stakeholder focus. Who's all involved? Have I got the message out to everybody? Am I paying attention to the schedule so we're staying coordinated, we're staying on track, things aren't going to be late? I understand what the risks are, I understand what the problems are, and you know what? This kind of sounds like a system, doesn't it? It is. And you can learn how to do this stuff. I mean, this is also pretty much fundamental project management. Okay? And it doesn't feel like magic, when you talk about it, but when you see it in action, it creates a network of enablement. Okay? And so that becomes one of the key strengths of execution. Now, we've covered 5 strengths here in the last 10, 15 minutes. So let's recap them real quick to see what we've talked about. Because we said we're here to learn how to create. So the analysis focused on stakeholder value, tenacious, courageous creativity. Clearly those are very related, aren't they, to creating solutions. Being able to deliver what we just talked about, goal-driven planning, systematic drive, very related to getting it done, delivery. Collaborate. And really, what the goal, the idea behind these overlapping circles is that when you see this in action, you actually can't separate it out. You can't separate out the skill required to get it done from the skill required to collaborate effectively. Okay? In fact, over our 23 years of teaching these kinds of skills, we started with the deliver, fundamental project management. We started there, but we ended up expanding out to collaboration and then to the front part of the life cycle, because you can't accomplish one without the other. Okay? So they all kind of come together to make it work. Now, if you're filling in your score sheet along the way here, you're kind of thinking about how well some of the people that, how well you do these things and how well some of the other people do them. But let's look at the one thing we haven't talked about so far, which is our mindset, our attitude. When the CEOs talk about being flexible, that's kind of an attitude, isn't it? And so my attitude message for you is think of this as a journey. I mean, really, from left to right, it's a journey. And what you realize after you've done this is that, okay, I understand what happened. But now put yourself at the front part of the life cycle. Is anybody there right now? Are you anybody here working on something that's new, change, trying to come up with solve a problem? Do you know exactly what's going to happen? No, you don't. So can I ask you a question about that? Does that make you anxious? A little bit. It sounds like more than maybe a little. I mean, yes, it makes me anxious. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I've made some promises, right? I've told people we're going to come through. I'm doing my best, but what? Yeah, what we're trying to do here is a journey of discovery. When you're on a journey of discovery, if you have a zero defect attitude, right, which a zero defect attitude is basically, we know how to do this, we don't make mistakes, right? Everything's in its place, bum, 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 totally predictable. Guess what? A zero defect attitude is a great thing to have when you're manufacturing things or when you're in a hospital. That's great. But if you're trying to drive a change, a zero defect attitude will freak you out, right? Because it drives you anxious. It's like, I should know this, but I don't. You have to live with ambiguity. You have to live with uncertainty. That's what I mean when I say you've got an attitude that's designed for innovation. Okay? The adventure attitude recognizes that you are on a journey of discovery. You don't know what's going to happen. You're making promises based on the best that you can do. Okay? You've got to live with ambiguity. You know that there's going to be disagreement. There's going to be conflict. And you say, yeah, that is exactly the environment I'm coming into. Let's have some fun. Okay? So, are they having fun? Yeah. You know, it's a little, they're getting wet. I guarantee you these people flip the raft later. I know that because I'm in the back. That's me with the red hat on. And we flipped the raft and I lost my hat. Okay? And we had a great time. So, who is the image of the innovative leader in that picture? The guy with the blue hat. You see that? The guide. What do guides do? What do guides do that make them good leaders for innovation?
They're supposed to keep you from flipping your boat.
Well, you know what? We knew that might happen, right?
Okay.
Right? Because we know that like you get in the water, you're going to get wet. Like you're going to go, you might flip, right? In fact, anybody been on a raft ride? So this is up on the Wenatchee River, outside of Leavenworth. Fantastic. I cannot endorse it enough. It was fun, totally fun, okay? But before you get in the water, what did the guide do to reduce the threats associated with flipping?
Yeah, boy.
I got a life jacket. They checked it. That's one. What else we do? They teach you what to do when you fall out, right?
Where to put your foot, how to...
Yeah. What not to do, how to pull somebody back in, right? So the guide doesn't just steer from the back. He prepared the team for the threats that he knew were very real, okay? And we had to accept that we were going to, anything could happen within a certain range, okay? And that's why we had life jackets on, because we were ready for that. What's the most important thing for this guide? What is the most important objective for this guide when we're out there? Safety, right? Safety. We want everybody to get back alive. I mean, no kidding, right? Everybody's going to return alive. But think about this. How is that a metaphor for your own leaders who are trying to drive change? Are they trying to create a safe atmosphere? And what if they're not? Okay? So if I'm a leader and I'm trying to drive change and I'm asking people to be courageous and I'm not trying to keep it safe, am I doing my job? Okay? What am I going to get? Am I going to get courage? Am I going to get risk-taking when I don't make it safe? So that's the guy in the blue hat. He's my hero. He's my innovative leader icon. Okay? So that was strength number 6. And number 7 is also a leadership strength. And that is being able to prioritize. I can tell you I see this all the time. Okay? And you know what? This is actually a picture of I-5. Can you see that, like up there? This is a picture of I-5. Why is there a traffic jam there? Because there are too many cars on the road, right? Now, if you've got a traffic jam in your office, you have too many new ideas trying to go through, right? Now, let me ask you something. Pick any one of those cars out, maybe like one of these trucks that you can see so easily. Think about that driver. That driver's a little frustrated, but in a half hour, an hour later, he or she got where they were going, right? And they were fine. But let's say for a moment that in the back, they were carrying something that had a really short shelf life. It was very perishable, right? Like a good idea. The driver might have survived it, but that fruit or that produce that they were carrying, too hot, took too long, they got there, they had to throw it away. What happens to our ideas, our innovations, when they're stuck in that freeway is they don't make it through. They just give it up partway through. And why is that bad? It's discouraging. It's discouraging to be the one that use your tenacity and your courage and your expertise and your energy, and you find out that nothing really happened. Okay? That's discouraging. What's the cost to the organization?
Loss of value.
Yeah, there's a loss of value. Now, is that the same as we were talking about Thomas Edison before with the 1800 attempts? You know? Is that really what I've got here? No, this is different, because it's like the big truck is the light bulb project, right? And it's stuck because somebody else is trying to invent something else, and somebody else is trying to invent something else. We're trying to make process changes and new product developments, and while we try to do everything and nobody's choosing what not to do, we end up putting a lot of energy into that. Look at all the gas being burned there, right? So in your organization, when people fail to prioritize, then all of the other 6 strengths are wasted, because you are not getting things done, but you are asking people to put all of their energy to work. That's a leadership challenge. Okay? So these 7 strengths that we've talked about, we've had a chance to think about them. I want you to go ahead and spend just a moment filling in the blank there. If you haven't done it as you went along, reflect on that. I'll give you a moment to reflect on that, and then we'll do some Q&A, okay? We'll talk a little bit about what we've discussed today, give you a chance to ask me some more questions. I'll ask you 1 or 2 questions. Okay. So, you've had a chance to reflect on that for a moment. Again, I'm trying to put to use what we know as trainers to be good technique, right? Give you a moment to reflect, give you something to write down, something to transfer back to your own workplace, this learning. Now, let's have a conversation. I've done most of the talking so far. What questions do you have? What comments do you have about this?
So where in this process do you put the buy-in from who's paying for it? So where does that fit in your
Great.
equation?
Right. So the right in the middle, that proposal, that's a critical piece of this, because the proposal is the first, could be the first really tangible point where you say, look, here's what the opportunity is, here's what we think we should do about it, we've done our work on it, and this is what it's going to take. And that proposal is the critical piece to prioritization, right? That should have the information you need to say, this idea is better. Good question. Thank you.
So you touched on it a little bit, but so often as leaders we want innovation, we want creativity, but we have very little room for error or mistakes, and we tend to squash that creativity. So what do you say to a leader or a manager who wants to get that, but they don't allow for, like you said, people are going to fail, right?
Right.
So how do you convince that leader that that needs to happen?
So you have to help them understand the difference, right, between a zero defect process and an innovation process. That you can have an innovation process, like new product development goes through an innovation process, but a good one has space in there. Okay? It's the same thing as if any of you have ever done a system test, like you're doing a new business system, and you say we're going to do a test period, but you don't have a fixed period afterward. What's your assumption about the test? That it's just going to confirm that everything was right? So it's just like defies common sense to a certain degree. So now I don't tell the manager, the leader, that they don't have common sense. But what I would say to them is exactly what I've said here, which is if you want people to come up with different ideas, to take risks, to be creative, you need to understand that the nature of that work is to come up with ideas that won't work. That the great idea is usually not the first idea you get. It could be the 5th, it could be the 10th, and it could be the 50th idea you get. And that's part of the process. So go in there willing to set enough time aside to come up with as many bad ideas as you need on your way to getting the good idea. Again, not many people want to invest in bad ideas. So that's why it takes courage from a company, from an organizational standpoint as well, okay, to think about how to do that. I want to ask you, which of the strengths that we talked about today tended to be the ones that were the best for the people that you were looking at? What are the people in your organization already pretty strong at? Anybody want to share some of the strongest characteristics? Please.
I think ours is team-driven. The management team feels that they actually get more things pushed through being collaborative. They work better together than individually.
That's great to hear. Good. Who else has an example of what was strong for your people that you evaluated?
Focusing on stakeholder value. I'm an attorney. We're attorneys. We are all about the stakeholders, and if not, we don't have the job the next day. So it starts and ends there.
Great. Thank you. Who else? What were strengths? Okay.
I think our team, we are great at the ideas. It's the completion and the prioritizing that, we struggle with. Everybody has great ideas, but nobody follows through and makes sure that they happen.
So good to know you've got good ideas, right? That's important too. But you've kind of summed it all up for me. This is kind of where I wanted to go here at the end, which is that we know that creativity is important, and we know that collaboration is important, and we know that execution is important. And no one of those things is going to get it done, right? And so that's why I want you to think about this total vision of create, collaborate, and deliver of the 7 strengths as a framework, and really a framework for building competencies, right? I want to take it beyond that, creative, flexible, collaborative sort of generality and push it into a place where you can consciously say, we're building these specific strengths in our organization. So that makes it actionable, and that makes it a takeaway. And then you'll be able to say, this is what we're good at, and this is what we're getting better at. Right? So with that, I will just say thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to be here today.